In this video, I'm here to talk about the sounds and phonology of Middle English and to drink Diet Dr. Pepper, and I'm all out of Diet Dr. Pepper, so let's get started. Pictured on this title page is an image of a fox, which seems to be either wrestling or fighting or cuddling with a magpie, which is a member of the corvid, the crow family, very common in Europe. I'm not sure what's going on there. This image is from the Bestiary, which is a book of beast lore from the Middle Ages that was sort of alphabetized or organized by different kinds of beasts, and it included both folkloric knowledge about that beast and what scientific knowledge they had, and so forth and so on. I just thought it was cute. So yeah, let's get started on this video because it's a little technical. What are the sounds of Middle English? All consonants are pronounced. We don't have silent consonants in Middle English. So like the word knight, like a knight in shining armor, was pronounced knicht. That GH, which might have been spelled with a yog character in the Middle Ages sometimes, was a velar fricative. Knicht. Also Dochter. The Old English and the Middle English word for daughter would have been Dochter. And so all the sounds are produced, and some of the sounds that are produced are ones that kind of dropped out of the language in their particular positions, which is why they went silent as well. Another thing about Middle English, especially earlier in the Middle English period, we have a tendency to turn all unstressed vowels into schwas, just to that middle sound, right? So secretary is secretary, right? Or penitentiary, that's not penitentiary, it's penitentiary, the way we say it, because it's not in a stressed position. So it loses its particular vowel quality and just goes to that untensed middle schwa sound. As in the, not the, right? It's spelled the, but it's pronounced the. Not so in the Middle English period. Maybe it's getting that way into the 1400s, but maybe not. I'm not sure. In the Middle Ages, the vowel system was much more like modern German or Italian or Swedish. It's what's sometimes called the 5-vowel system, or sometimes it's referred to as continental vowels, as in the continent of Europe, as in not England. A, E, O, U, and variations of that. No, A, I, and all those things. The only consonant not in modern English, in Middle English, is a voiced velar fricative, which is, remember that sound knicht in night? Well, it's like that, but voice. So it's like, imagine if you said knicht, it's like a sound. And this sound would have been found in words like you instead of you. In some regions for a long time, the word you would have been pronounced you, or ye would have been the accusative case of that. The word enough would have been pronounced enoch, enoch. The word bow, as in when the bow breaks, would have been boo, boo, right? That velar fricative. But that sound turned into, that g sound turned into a number of other sounds depending on the environment. The word boga, which is Old English for bow, as in archery, turns into boga later in the Middle Ages, and then bow or bow. Dag, or would have become dag, and which would eventually became day. So we have this movement from a g to a g to a voiceless or velar fricative, just to approximate ya, and that sometimes then gets fronted to a w sound or stays as a ya. So morgen, which is in German still the word for morning or tomorrow. Morgen becomes morgen, which becomes morrow or tomorrow, right? Ploga becomes plow. Fugel, which is in modern German vogel, bird, becomes the modern word fowl. And here's an example of semantic narrowing. Originally, the word fugel in Old English meant any kind of bird, but in modern English, fowl usually just refers to the kind of game birds that are used for eating, like chickens and roosters and turkeys and things like that. Another sound change from Old to Middle English was the loss of the word the letter H in a lot of environments. Especially Old English has these H's in front of consonants, like in hlaf. The word loaf, as in loaf of bread, just turns into loaf. And as we'll see later, that also shows a change in vowel that's common from Old English to Middle English. Hrathor becomes rather. This next one is my favorite one. Hnutu is nut, and so Hnutu becomes nut, nutty. Knicht becomes knicht, and Dochter becomes doctor, but eventually both of these turns into knicht, and daughter. So that H loss happens a lot. Hlaf, by the way, that loaf that's the basis, as you know by now, of another compound word, hlafwarden, the loaf keeper or the loaf guard, which becomes Lord. Give us this day our daily bread, bread keeper. All right, so some other sound changes in Middle English is the loss of distinctive vowel length. We talked about that earlier. I'm not going to go deep into that now. We also get what's called a liquid reduction. So we get a loss of a w sound in a lot of environments. The word swa becomes so. Swilch becomes such. Twa the word toi for two becomes the two, even though it still preserves the W. As Seth Lear points out in Inventing English, English spelling is etymological. It preserves the history of the language. This is also the case in the word sword, sweord or sword. And I think the word sword might be connected to the word swear, in that they would swear an oath on their swords. We get changes in vowel height. Remember that last slide? Hlaf becomes loaf. Well, most becomes most. Ham becomes home. That ham is what you see in a lot of English place names, like Birmingham, Cheapingham, West Ham, Nottingham, so on and so forth. Of course, if you in Britain, mostly that ham has become de-emphasized to the point where it's barely pronounced at all. Another common sound change from Old to Middle English and from Middle English to Modern English is metathesis. And metathesis is when you swap vowels. So, for example, the word beorcht becomes bright. The R goes in front of the velar fricative. Beorcht becomes bricht. And the word gars becomes grass. The R goes in front of the A. Another example that's not on this slide is brida. Brida is a bird, and it becomes bird. So the R has this tendency to move to the front of a vowel. Here's a different situation. The word axion, each axa, Chaucer might have written, is ask. So if you hear somebody who you think of as uneducated saying, let me ask you a question, like my cousins in Long Island. You find X for ask in various dialects of English. That's Old English. That's Middle English, right? So it got swapped at one point from X to ask, but some people have either swapped it back or have just maintained that pronunciation all the way through. This video is almost done. I just want to leave you with a sample of a little bit of Middle English poetry.
In a summer season when soft was the sun, he shook me in shroudes as he a shape were, inhabite as an heremita, unholy of workers, went weede in this world, wanderers to here, ac on a my morninga, on mal wern hoes, maybe fell a fairly of fire me thuchta.
Those are the opening lines of Piers Plowman, a very important religious poem of the late 14th century, which was a dream vision that had a lot to say about contemporary affairs in the church and theology and how things were run and how people were living. This is the famous prologue in which the dreamer is imagining that he is dressing up as a kind of monk, as a hermit, and going out into the world to see what the world is like on a May morning. The illustration here is from a manuscript from the Bodleian Library of the sea text of Piers Plowman by William Langland. And in it depicts a laborer holding a spade, because there a lot of Piers Plowman is about the value and importance of laborers who generate the livelihood and the substance by which everybody else lives. So that's just my little cultural note at the end of this video. In the next video, we will talk about morphology and learn things like why every other Germanic language has gendered nouns, but English doesn't. Bye.